What would be my self-condemnation began on an ordinary day, one of those in which the routine of the week takes you almost on autopilot. During my lunch break at work, I was swiping through Instagram, and suddenly this photo appeared that left me, to say the least, shocked. But first of all, I'm going to briefly introduce myself so you can get into context. My life revolved around my family and work. My husband, George, was a man who was always very good to me. In fact, when we were young, we were college friends for years before we started dating. At that time, I was 34 years old. Our son was 7 years old, and he was a blessing to me, since he had given a very deep meaning to my life. My life had fallen into a constant calm, but perhaps too monotonous. I felt like most of my days were a spiral of repetition. The weeks passed with the same predictability. And although everything seemed stable on the surface, deep down I felt a longing for something more, something different. He was longing for a change, although he didn't know exactly what kind. I still remember that Saturday as if it were yesterday. We were in the kitchen, George and I, each one doing their own thing. My husband never had much initiative, so while stirring the coffee, I pitched the idea to him. "Hey George, how would you like to do something different next weekend? We have almost the entire week off. We could take advantage of it somehow." George looked up and smiled at me with that intrigued expression. "Something different? I like the idea. What do you have in mind?" It was at that moment that I suggested the idea of meeting up with some couples and friends from college. I told him about the possibility of renting a country house, enjoying the good weather, and reconnecting with old friends. "We could hang out with the friends we still have dealings with. Remember old times. What do you think?" George enthusiastically nodded his head. "I like it. And who do you think could join?" It was then that I mentioned several friends. Among them was Jack, our son's godfather. Jack had been one of the popular kids at university, the typical one who was always surrounded by girls and who brought an air of adventure with him. He was one of my husband's best friends, since they had played together on a soccer team and then met throughout college. George nodded with a smile, intrigued by the idea of combining the nostalgia of university days with the peace and tranquility of a country house. And that's how we began to plan what would become the beginning of a story that I still didn't understand. During those days, we created a WhatsApp group to propose the plan, and out of 12 people, 8 confirmed that they were going to come, including Jack and his partner. During the next few weeks, everything continued with the usual routine, although with a little more encouragement since we had the bridge closer and closer, so it motivated me in some way. Now let's go back to the moment of the photo, that lunch break at work, sliding my finger through Instagram between cat photos and memes. A photo of Jack appeared. But wait, it wasn't a normal photo, no sir. Jack, with an elegant blue shirt and beige pants that could rival the tightest fashion, had a bulge that deserved a separate chapter. My expression was one of being stunned. Seriously, Instagram? At that moment, a flashback came to me of when in college, Jack flirted with me for a while, and although I was attracted to him like most girls, I played tough since I didn't want to be one more on his list. Weeks later, the appointed day arrived, and as we began the trip to the country house, the excitement of meeting everyone again was exciting. The landscape changed as we left the city behind, and the relaxed atmosphere of nature took over us. The farmhouse, surrounded by trees, welcomed us with a sense of calm. Laughter and hugs from reunited friends filled the place, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The first night passed amid lively chats, laughter, and a pinch of nostalgia as we remembered anecdotes and old times. Jack, as always, displayed his charm and told stories that had us all waiting. Although his history with girls was already well known, it simply added a touch of spice to the anecdotes. We did several activities during the first days. We went on routes, we visited beautiful surrounding towns, and the next day, we planned to go to a river that was very close to the house. It had a waterfall and a small waterfall where people bathed, and spent the day there. First thing in the morning, I received a notification from my boss. I had to make an urgent video call for a last-minute work issue. Given the need for concentration and stable connection, I made the decision to stay at the rural house until I had finished the meeting and then join the group. I settled in a quiet room with my computer. In a moment of pause, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and as I walked down the hallway, I heard the shower in one of the bathrooms running, so I thought someone had accidentally left it running before leaving. To my surprise, when I entered the bathroom, I found Jack as God brought him into the world, and I couldn't stop my gaze from wandering towards his great friend. Surprised and embarrassed, I quickly backed away when I saw him in that compromising situation. My cheeks flushed immediately, and I could barely speak a word. Jack, with a hasty apology, said to me, "Oh, wow, I'm so sorry. I thought no one else was home." I, nervous and trying to hide my discomfort, responded, "No, don't worry, Jack. It was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry." But suddenly his face changed and he headed towards the door where I was and closed it quickly with me inside. At that moment, I was completely paralyzed and could hardly speak a word. Before I could say anything coherent, Jack placed his hand over my mouth and whispered in my ear, "We are alone, and I have noticed that during these days you have looked at me several times." At that moment, he took my hand away from my mouth and kissed me. I was still in shock, but feeling completely uncontrolled heat, I followed the kiss. In a moment of debauchery, we let ourselves be completely carried away by the passion and my secret desire that I had for him. It was something very intense. After that moment, Jack broke the silence. "I'm sorry if I took you by surprise, but I couldn't help it. There has been a tension between us these days, and I think we both feel it." Still stunned by what had just happened, I asked him why he had stayed at the house, and he told me that he had gone to town to buy breakfast, and then he had stopped by to take a quick shower and go with everyone. Later, each one went on his own and at different times to hide to the place where everyone was. I didn't feel like arriving because I didn't know how to deal with it and how to hide it before I could coldly reflect on what I had just done, but I had no other option. So I spent the whole day wearing sunglasses and trying to act normal. Jack seemed used to that since during that day he spoke with his partner and my husband completely normal. For me, it cost me a lot more. There was a moment when we had already returned to the rural house that I locked myself in the bathroom and started crying, realizing what I had done and the consequences that could have. After that day at the rural house, the following weeks were very hard for me. I tried to continue with the daily routine, but the image of the moment with Jack and the associated emotional burden constantly haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about the consequences of my actions and how they would affect my life. Finally, the time came when I couldn't take it anymore. Guilt and regret ate away at me inside. One night, I decided to be honest with my husband, George. I felt unable to continue hiding the truth from him and to continue with a charade that was destroying our relationship. We sat on the couch at home looking into each other's eyes, and I began to tell him what happened at the rural house. Tears fell down my cheeks as I told him everything. George, initially shocked, listened in silence. The expression on his face went from disbelief to sadness and finally to anger. After hearing my confession, he stood up without saying a word and left the room. I felt a knot in my stomach and the certainty that I had just destroyed the life we had built together, and what saddened me the most was my son. Hours passed before George returned, and when he did, his words were sharp and full of pain. "I can't believe you did this," were the first words he spoke. The conversation that followed was filled with tears, screams, and unanswered questions. I tried to explain my reasons, but for George, that did not justify the betrayal. Over time, George, unable to get over the betrayal, decided that our relationship could not continue. Despite my tears and pleas, the decision was made. We separated, and I watched my life sink. The divorce was a painful and public process. Friends and family took sides, and many of them distanced themselves from me. Jack, for his part, continued with his life as if nothing had happened, showing no signs of remorse. In the months that followed, I faced isolation and loneliness. The attraction I had felt for Jack faded, and I was left with the weight of my impulsive decisions. The lesson learned was painful but clear. The search for something more, in the wrong place and in the wrong way, can destroy what we value most, family. This is the story of how my search for change led me to the loss of what I loved most. Even today, I face the consequences of my actions and seek to rebuild my life, knowing that some wounds will never fully heal. And what do you think? I hope you don't judge me too much. If you want more confessions like this, I would appreciate a like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and until next time.